share this screen with you in a moment. The one thing I wanted to say, though, was if you have any questions from last week's class, that was on illness, mourning, death, afterlife, which we raced through. It could have been it could have been a 4-week course, basically. Then just write them in the chat, and I'll go back at the end, because I'm hoping we won't be down to the wire on this one, and that I can go back at the end and answer some of those questions. Okie dokie. All right, here we go. Share screen. Da, 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 da. Okay, can y'all see? Yes, good. All right, let me move this over. Okay, here we go. All right. Self-care, is it a Jewish value or a commandment? So I know it's very hard to believe this is already our 6th week. It's unbelievable. But so I wanted to first look at some contemporary examples of dealing with this question of self-care, because I know that if we go right into the rabbinic text, sometimes it can feel a little bit confusing. It's not as easy to access. I think this is more relatable. So this is actually, I have used this article a few times to begin our classes. You may or may not remember, it was called Stories of Tough Jobs and Loneliness of Quarantine, from way back in April 20th. But the stories are all real life accounts. And this is from a 36-year-old woman, Diane Marco, and she writes, at first, a lot of advice for dealing with self-quarantine came in the form of seize the opportunity blogs, online workout options, and ambitious baking challenges. Get fitter, smarter, craftier. You can do it. But soon after came the wave of self-care and self-kindness advice, promising to save all of us from the pressure of ourselves. Take it easy. It's okay to binge watch Netflix. And taco night? How about taco week? Overtook the mantras of needing to come out of this with sculpted abs and a hand-carved chess set. I love that. This give yourself a break advice, though, is disastrous for me as someone with depressive tendencies. These days, my brain wants to lie down with a blanket. Are you still watching Netflix, would ask me? Sure am. Thanks for checking. I want to ingest sugar and salt and blow off exercise, healthy cooking, outdoor time, and cleaning up in favor of a sedentary existence on a comfy couch. I can't give in to those urges. I know that starting those habits is a slippery slope for me. I think we have to find what works for each of us during this strange time. There isn't one right way to navigate through this, and I have to pick out what feels right for me, really right for me, and pass by the perspectives that are just a bad fit. So in what ways has this virus challenged you to seize the opportunity to achieve large goals, from ambitious baking to getting fitter, smarter, and craftier? And has this been helpful, or has this created more stress? I will speak for myself while I'm waiting to see if anybody, and if you don't write in the chat, believe me, it's okay. I totally get it. It's a no pressure class. I know this has been very stressful for me. I have several close friends whose method of coping has been to clean and straighten and organize from top to bottom, every dust speck, everything. And quite honestly, listening to them talk about this has really caused me a lot of stress, greater stress. I'm all into the midah, the trait of, beauty and order, meaning that when we order the space around us and make it prettier or more beautiful, there is, that can be calming. But sort of this frenzied approach has been stressful for me personally. For others, it has seemed to provide, comfort. So somebody said gardening for real. Somebody said, I've always thought that if I just had more time, I would get so many tasks done, right? Like these big projects, but I've discovered that that really isn't true at all. That this frenzy to clean has been an increase in stress and a decrease in stress. I've ignored a lot of advice. I just make a daily checklist and enjoy seeing those items checked off. Very good. Good for all of you. Very, very good. Outstanding. Okay, so let's go on to the second question, which, in what way has the take it easy and give yourself a break advice been helpful or more stressful? If you've heeded this advice, do you feel guilty for time wasted? Somebody else said, wait a minute, I felt ambitious at first, but that seems to have worn off. Okay, and hopefully, Earl Marie, you don't feel guilty about that. That's the hope. I've been writing every day in theorem of a manuscript that I hope may become a book. Great. I balance the discipline of writing nearly every day has helped. It's relaxed. It's related to the virus. Meanwhile, I'm finally getting to my taxes. Very good. I keep saying I'm going to get to my taxes, but I need a little bit of a slowdown in the illness and death department in our community. I've always been on the go, 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 finding out I like my own company. Lovely. I doubled my vegetable garden. Outstanding. It was therapeutic. The gift of watching things grow and planting things my dad used to plant. And now I've learned about different fungi. So the Jane writes, yes, meaning it's been more helpful and more stressful. I have no problem being at home, but I get depressed when I don't know when I can see my children. Totally makes sense to me. A lot of people have felt that way. You know, just there's a lot of disappointment in, you know, in not being able to, you know, do the plans that people had planned. Like someone was telling me that, you know, they really feel badly that they're expecting another grandchild and that their goal was, their plan had been to go there for the birth, wherever there is, and that they can't now. And other people are writing that I miss traveling and seeing my grandchildren. People enjoy vicariously hearing about everyone's garden since they can't make their own. Okay, good. Generally a neat and organized person, but haven't jumped on the cleanliness bandwagon. Secretly relieved that my kids and grandkids couldn't come for the last week in April. Yep, that's another way to feel, which is totally understandable. Spending more, someone said they've been able to spend more time with the grandchild in Pennsylvania because they help with the homework. And that I assume is over Zoom or FaceTime, spending time with their mom. Abby writes, I've spent more time with my mom. This is the most time I've spent with my mom since I was in the womb. Good. Andrea writes, I try to stay in the present and not focus on what will be in a month or two. And some people look forward to the structured hour of real learning. Great. Outstanding. Okay, so did you find yourself coping with stress in common ways, like I want to ingest sugar and salt and blow off exercise, or the opposite, by exercising and overcleaning? And we've heard that some people have, you know, that it's been both for some people, one or the other, and for a lot of people trying to stay in the middle ground. This is the real question. What helps you pick what feels right for you? Specifically of prayer, studying in this class, meditation, walking, gardening, or anything else been helpful in calming you enough to hear the still small voice within you letting you know what you need to do to get through this time hole? Some people have enjoyed the solitude, right? Some people have enjoyed the time figuring out better ways to spend time with their grandchildren. I find that that even in solitude, sometimes it's very hard to be still. You know, you can be frenzied even in solitude, and it can be quiet all around you, but inside can be like a train running, you know? So I think it's hard to just sit and, you know, and be and sort out, you know, how, you know, what you need. You know, what do I need, you know, right this minute? And that can be a hard thing to do. All right, this next one I love. Oh, somebody said their back went out. Yeah, that caused them to chill. Right. Yeah, it's sometimes, you know, somebody said that walking their dog is helpful. Being still and being quiet are not one and the same. Exactly correct. It's a time for, it's a fun time for introverts and a burdensome time for extroverts. That's true. That's true. Some introverts have actually commented that they really that this has been helpful for them in a way. Okay, this I love this one. This woman, Tamal Ray, is an anesthesiologist who was also a finalist on season 6 of the Great British Bake Off, and she wrote an opinion column in the Washington Post some years ago. She writes, "My epiphany of how quickly things were changing didn't come with the first news reports of a novel virus in Wuhan, nor from my conversations with colleagues at the hospital where I work as an anesthesiologist. It happened in the baking aisle of my local supermarket. I had gone to pick up a few things for dinner several weeks ago, just before all those stories of stockpiling, before people realized how dearly important toilet paper was to them. This store normally did such meager business that I wondered how they paid the rent each month. But that day the place was heaving, a long queue snaking forward to each till." You can tell she's British because they use a little bit different words than we do. "The shelves were picked clean of fruit and vegetables, and there wasn't a single loaf of bread or 6-pack of mini apple pies left. No matter, I strode to the baking aisle, sure that after years of baking at home, a spot of panic buying wouldn't affect me. I could make as many biscuits and boulets and puff pastry pies as my oven would allow, but my confidence crumbled like an overmixed cake when I saw the section as barren as the rest of the store. Even the ground almonds, previously the Provence of macaron lovers, and the gluten-free were gone. I didn't have weeks to prepare for the coronavirus. It was here, it was changing our lives, and I wasn't going to be the only one baking through it. It seems the whole globe has ignited their ovens. Pictures of cakes and pies have sprung up all over social media, alongside accounts of beginning bakers' first forays into sourdough. People the world over are keeping their bodies and minds occupied through the simple act of making something. For many, baking has become the perfect cure for the boredom that comes from having been grounded by your government. Stuck at home all day, idle hands need something to do, so what better time for all those rainy day projects? Doing my own home baking and seeing everyone else's has become an essential distraction for me, because while most people work, school and social lives have been ground to a halt, for a hospital worker such as myself, things have gotten rather busier. Our schedules have been redrawn as we shift from caring for patients undergoing routine surgery to massively expanding our intensive care capacity. We're consumed by a cacophony of daily updates with grim statistics, graphs of runaway exponential curves, and predictions of deaths in the tens of thousands. But then I come home, change from what I wore in the hospital, and don my apron, and I bake. Because baking is about more than just filling idle time for those with too much of it. I bake because in a time of unprecedented upheaval, it is uniquely comforting. Perhaps it's that reassuring and familiar cadence of a recipe. Add 1 cup of flour, half a cup of milk, stir until the world melts away and you forget your troubles. Or being able to see a clear beginning and end when everything in the rest of our lives seems so uncertain. The structure of a recipe provides order to those cut off from their usual routine." And then it goes on, "But yet through baking, we relive our connections with people we're now separated from. I make a crumble and remember my sister teaching me to rub the cold butter and flour with my fingertips. I think of my niece and nephew squabbling over whose turn it is to stir the batter and lick the bowl. Video calls have been a godsend in this pandemic, but memory needs more to be nourished. Every day in the hospital brings more patients with the telltale coughs, aches, breathlessness. I wonder how many more we will admit, how many we can admit. And as colleagues start to fall ill, I wonder whether any of them will feel unwell enough to become our patients. How would I handle seeing coworkers become sick, seeing friends put on ventilators?" And she goes on, but then she says, "But in my kitchen, my quiet corner of the world, I still have control. I'll knead the dough, which I have done 100 times before. I'll stir the mix and pour the batter. I'll watch bread rise and savor that familiar, delicious aroma as it crackles fresh from the oven. And I'll remember that here in this moment, things still seem small and personal and manageable." It is a beautiful piece. Someone wrote they just took their sourdough starter out of the fridge. Good for you, Prue. Well, this is an English, this woman is an English woman. So I wonder if that has anything to do with that. So why or how is baking such a helpful distraction and great comfort for Dr. Ray? Is it a bit like meditation or prayer? I think it is for her. You know, it wouldn't necessarily work for me, you know, but I think for some people it does. And I don't know if some of you are friends, like she posted this on the Ohef Sholom Friends page. So it's not like you know, it's not Lashon Hora, but, you know, she's been doing like Lee Nussbaum has been doing some incredible cooking projects. She made 3 different kinds of homemade bagels. And I'm talking like, you know, complicated bagels, not like egg or water bagels. And she cured her own lox and she made cream cheese from scratch. I mean, I've never even heard of such things. But, you know, as someone was saying, the plus is you have a good outcome, you know, it's like a nice, fun thing, especially for someone who enjoys it. And what distractions, hobbies, or interests have helped to make this episode feel smaller, more personal, and more manageable? And I have said in the past, I certainly have enjoyed preparing these lessons and teaching, which is something that, you know, I had not been doing for a very, very long time. And it reminded me, you know, why I became a rabbi and how much for many, many years, you know, I enjoyed doing this for you know, a couple decades. So, you know, that's just been helpful to find that place. Cooking and baking allows me time to enjoy family memories. Exactly. And that's what she's saying. She said as well that, you know, igniting memories is also a way of healing. Now there's a lot of you writing. The repetition and the focus leaves little time for distraction. It rewarded her with memories, much like prayer. And some people create dump recipes by looking everything, you know, just by taking things in their pantry and dumping them in. And there are some of those dump cakes and stuff that people make. So somebody baked their first challah 3 weeks ago. Yes, Sylvia, we saw pictures, beautiful. For those who are neither artistic or crafts people, it's something creative you can do 100%, absolutely. Yep, you have something to look forward to. Yes, she writes about predictability, right? This is an unpredictable time, but if you do it, so somebody writes, I'm going to read this, Karen, because it's being the head of my house with autistic kids and aging parents. This could easily be overwhelmingly stressful. I'm a sacrificer. I've run myself in the ground to care for everyone too many times. I've had to remember what my dad taught, bite-sized bites, exactly. Do what I can today, including spirit time and self-care time. Homeschool, garden, yard, house, and projects will always be there. So do what I can in a day, giving myself permission to pick up what hasn't been done the next day. Exactly. We could be in this situation for a while, so it's important to pace ourselves and to enjoy what we can of this time as well. Setting up the house at a healthy pace, etc. You know, one thing I didn't mention, or I haven't mentioned in my list is, you know, for some people, reading is a wonderful stress reliever and resetter of pace and of mood. Okay. Yes, Karen, you can talk to us. Everybody here loves to talk, so keep talking to us. All right. So let me see if there were any questions. What distractions, hobbies, or interests have helped to make this episode feel smaller and more manageable? Okay, now this is from my sister. She does not know I'm sharing this, but it's so funny because my sister is a wealth manager. So you couldn't get farther away from a rabbi, right? I mean, it's like a totally opposite, you know, profession, but she writes so beautifully, really. So this is from March 14th, but I kept it because I really liked it. The last 24 hours have brought on a whirlwind of emotions with the escalation of news and protocol with regard to coronavirus. I'm all about freedom, choice, and security, and this has triggered every one of the values I preach and live by. The market shelves are bare, there's a frenzy for toilet paper, and you can no longer hug and comfort friends and neighbors because we are instructed to stand 6 feet apart. This morning when I set out for my morning workout, the doors were locked at the gym. Travel plans were canceled, and many of us are laying low in our homes waiting for news about what's going to happen next. I'm telling myself that it is what it is. I need to be patient and pray this all passes soon. I'm confronted by all the things that have piled up on my to-do list as well. Now that I actually have time to do them, they're still not getting done. Surprise, surprise, right? The human mind loves to show us what is wrong and remind us of where we are falling short. I thought that was pretty profound. I'm convinced the way to live right now is with deeper awareness of our humanity. The way to set the standard for how I want the world's events to play out for me is in action, what I'm committed to doing during this time. Meditation twice a day, journal my feelings, continue to focus on my work and what matters most, accept every moment without creating drama. Amen. Help others who need my support now, spend time with my husband and kids. We played a fun game called What Do You Mean Today? And I must say that when I was visiting LA, now it feels like 10 years ago, but whenever my last visit was, which, you know, it's always every 6 months. So 6 months ago, we played this game and it's really fun. You know, it's like you pick cards and then there's a question and you pick like the picture on your card, you know, that you think best describes the meme, and somebody else votes. You know, they don't know who laid down which one, and it's really kind of a fun thing. And sharing my fears and reminding others they're not alone. Lovely. And then this is what she writes she's committed not to do. Getting munchies and getting nervous, sitting and snacking while watching the news and getting lost in social media, panicking about what I cannot control and feeling like a victim, even though we are all in the same coronavirus boat. And then she reminds us, many have been struck harder than others. Please reach out now if you need support. Spending the next few days not getting out of the house and not moving my body. This isn't meant to be a rah-rah self-help post, but I do think this time we need to stay healthy and centered. We need to remind ourselves how strong we all are and push harder than ever to put forth our very best regardless of the circumstances. Hashtag peaceful, hashtag beautiful night, hashtag prayers for all. Okay, what steps does my sister, who does not know that I'm sharing this post, take to take care of herself? We don't need to run through them again. We just read them, but you know, she gives herself a list of do's and don'ts, and they're general enough that they aren't so specific that they would stress anyone out. In what ways does this middle way approach help with staying healthy and centered? Boy, oh boy, my phone's blowing up. Not a good sign. In what ways does this middle way approach help? It keeps her sane. She has a plan. Excellent. I love the memories. Oh, yeah. Someone's talking about, this was from the previous about the baking, but who would thought that cutting up a chicken would invoke so much love, because she was remembering, Joyce is remembering her mom doing that. Anyway, yes, it keeps her sane. And that, you know, my mother always said, you know, everything in moderation. And that's just like a hard adage to keep hold of, but it's so true. All right, now let's get into the Jewish text. So we're going to see now. I'm going to answer the question. You know, does Judaism value self-care or command self-care? It absolutely does. So I'm like giving you the answer to the question. You're going to see. Okay, the Gemara, part of the Talmud, explains another verse in Proverbs, and I think we saw this way early on in our maybe like 5 weeks or 6 weeks ago. If there is anxiety in a person's heart, let him or her quash it. That comes from Proverbs. And they're playing on this words, Yeshena. So Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi dispute the verse's meaning. One said, if there's anxiety in a man's heart or a person's heart, the person should forcefully push it out of his mind. One who worries should banish his concerns from his thoughts. The other rabbi says it means that you should share your concern with others, which will lower your anxiety. So either way, what does this text say about how to deal with being in a state of anxiety or stress? So I would just answer, it says we should deal with it. You know what I mean? We need to be proactive. It doesn't tell us which way the law fell, according to Rabbi Asi or Rabbi Ami. But the point is that if you are feeling stress, by our tradition, you need to either get help, or find a way yourself to manage it, one way or the other. So let's read on. So in reading the following 3 texts, consider these questions. Why is it important to take care of ourselves? What does it mean if we diminish ourselves, we lessen God's image? Why does Hillel the elder regard his trips to the bathhouse as a commandment? And is because God said so a compelling enough reason to take care of yourself? Why or why not? All right. So basically, we're going to be looking at texts that relate to 3 different biblical texts. So the first one is, that we're created in the image of God. So he would say, beloved is the person created in the image of God. A deeper love is revealed to those created in God's image, for in God's own image, God made humankind. Why would a person created in the image of God be beloved? Why would that make you beloved? Perhaps because God created us in love, right? A deeper love is revealed to those created in God's image because God created us in God's image. Because God is love. Very beautiful. Very beautiful. Good. All right. Why are we forbidden to make images of God? It is not because God is beyond all images, so that no image could possibly depict God. If that were the case, images would merely be harmless. God has an image, and that is you. You may not make an image of God because you are the image of God. The only medium in which you can make God's image is the medium of your entire life. And that is precisely what we are commanded to do. Everything you do, everything you say, each moment, and the way you use it are all part of the way you build God's image. To take anything less than a full living human being, like canvas or a piece of marble, and call it the image of God would be to diminish God or to lessen God's image. Right, someone's writing, it's not a choice, right? We are all in God's image. We are the image of God. So to harm ourselves or not take care of ourselves in any way is to lessen the image of God, right? It's to harm God. Ruth Shepard wrote, who, me? Yes, you too, Ruth, are the image of God. We are all the image of God, right? Each and every one of us is. So if we're created in the image of God, if the entirety of ourselves is God's image, then any time that we don't love ourselves, care for ourselves, we're not only harming ourselves, we're diminishing God. It's a bigger, I think it's hard sometimes to see ourselves as holy, but we are. Just because we are. This is my big thing that I work on in therapy every week. I'm worthy just because I am, not because of what I do. But I think I'm only worthy based on what I do. But that's not really how it is. And that is exactly what Rabbi Heschel, as quoted by Rabbi Green, is saying here, right? We are worthy just because we are. Therefore, when we hurt ourselves, right, we tarnish that divine image as well. Okay, the merciful man does good to his own soul. This refers to Hillel the elder, who at the time he was departing from his students would walk with them. I love this story. They said to him, Rabbi, where are you going? He said, to fulfill a commandment. And they said, well, what commandment are you going to fulfill? He says, to bathe in the bathhouse. And they said to him, but is this really a commandment, to bathe in the bathhouse? And he says to them, yes. just like regarding the statues of kings that are set up in theaters and in circuses. The one who is appointed over them bathes them and scrubs them, and they give him sustenance, and furthermore, he attains status with the leaders of the kingdom. I, right, me, Rabbi Hillel, who was created in the divine image and form, as it is written, for in the image of God, God made us, all the more so. So what does this story tell us? I think this is a great illustration right out of the Midrash by Yikra Rabbah. What does this tell us? Why is it a commandment to go and bathe himself in the bathhouse, which is, kind of a luxurious thing? Because we're created in the image of God, right? We're commanded to take care of ourselves. So anytime we do anything kind or nurturing or nourishing for ourselves, whether it be, I guess the equivalent for us of going to the bathhouse would be like going to get a massage. It would be like if we rewrote it and said, I'm fulfilling a commandment. Well, what commandment? The commandment to get a massage, to get a regular massage. That's a commandment? Well, yeah, it's a commandment. Bathing is taking care of the holiness of our bodies. It's choosing life, exactly. All of the above. It's choosing life. It's a commandment to take care of ourselves, right? And even it's not just a commandment to take care of ourselves like the basics, like food, clothing, shelter. Like this is actually already like a step above, right? This is really doing something nice for himself. And he considers it a commandment. Well, if Hillel considers a commandment, right? The merciful man does good to his own soul, from Proverbs, right? A compassionate person should be compassionate with his or herself. Okay. All right. Going on to the next commandment. So the first one is we're created in the image of God. This one is love your neighbor as yourself. Okay. So some questions to consider as we're reading the commentaries. What does this verse mean to you? Is it possible to love your neighbor as yourself? And does this verse mean that one has to love oneself before we can or have the capacity to love our fellows? Why or why not? Well, let's just answer some of these questions before we see what the commentaries, the traditional commentaries say. What does the verse mean to you? Love your neighbor as yourself, or love your fellow as yourself. Not so easy, right? I mean, we could say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but sometime, right, to always respect others and be aware of their needs, to care about others as you care about yourself, of course, to take care of oneself, that we're all created equal, yes, but to put your neighbor at the center of your concerns as you do yourself, to be tolerant and non-judgmental, lovely, proof that everyone's created in the image of God, to treat all living things, pets, the planet, and people with respect and dignity, to share in our humanity. Excellent, everyone. Yeah, I think it can mean all those things. I think sometimes it's difficult because people don't care for themselves as well as they might, so then you wonder, if you only care for others and not for yourself, that's problematic too. So many kids in religion classes have told me, we didn't get the end of that, to wish them goodwill, to have good intentions for them as you have for yourself. Loving kindness, compassion, and empathy are ways to release and harden ourselves with negative options. It's a balance and means having it for yourself to then be loving kindness. Yes. But I don't love myself. Right. That's the problem. But I don't love myself. It's hard. People who are self-critical. Remember, my sister wrote, the mind loves to tell itself when it's failing and falling short. Right. It's inherent in the phrase that you're commanded to take care of yourself first. Right. You know that whole image Don't love your neighbor more than you care for yourself. Okay, that's good, Jane. That's good. I had not thought of that. But I was thinking of, when caring for yourself first, in the airplane, they always say, in the event of an emergency, the oxygen masks will fall. Put the mask over your own face and then help your children. Where our instinct would be to immediately put the mask on the child. But if we then pass out in the process, we're not helping anybody. You know what I mean? So I think that's don't love your neighbor more than care for. I think the O2 mask is to be coherent so you can put it on. Exactly. So that you're not, right. Okay. So let's look at a couple of these. This is from Sefer HaChinuch, which is the book of education, which is by Maimonides. If you don't care for yourself first, how can you care for anyone else? Very good. One should love each and every Jew with a soul love. This means one should have compassion on each Jew and on his possessions, just like one has compassion on himself and his possessions. For it says, and you shall love your fellow as you love yourself. The specific laws of this mitzvah are included in the general principle of the mitzvah, that a person should deal with his fellow just like he would deal with himself, to guard his possessions and protect them from any damage. And if speaking about him, he should speak of his praises and take compassion for his honor and not elevate your honor on the cause of his humiliation. So what might it mean to love another with soul love? I love that. Should love, this says each and every Jew, but each and every person, I'm sorry, somebody must have passed because it's just blowing up. So what does it mean to a soul love, complete unconditional love? Okay. I think also just that love where you really try as hard as you can, like to connect with that person and their shared humanity, etc. Right? Soul, to love fully. Jews share a soul. Okay. What does the text teach us? That we need to have compassion for our own honor. And speak of our own praises as well of does this text teach us that we need to have compassion for our own honor and speak of our own praises as well as our fellows? In other words, is self-care inherent in this love your neighbor as yourself commandment? I think so too. Somebody wrote, Linda said, I think so too. Neshama is all of one, right? Soul is all of one, the positive, the negative, the did and the didn't. Good, yes. Okay, good. All right, one. And I do like this, take compassion for a person's honor. Don't elevate your honor on account of his humiliation. There are many people who put others down to feel better about themselves. And that is a particularly unflattering and distasteful quality. Particularly, you know what I mean? It's just particularly not a good one. Okay. Rabbi Gamliel, son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, says, the verse that states, and he will show you mercy and have compassion on you and multiply you, teaches us that anyone who has compassion for God's creatures will receive compassion from heaven, and anyone who does not have compassion for God's creatures will not receive compassion from heaven. Does having compassion upon God's creatures refer to ourselves as well as others? Sometimes we do forget ourselves. I taught my kids to look in the mirror, look into your own eyes. There is a friend full of love. Lovely, Joyce, lovely. So does having compassion upon other creatures refer to ourselves as well? And do compassionate people experience God's compassion? Hopefully. I hope so. I can't say always, but I would think they do. I would think so. Anybody else have any other? Okay. All right. They taught the following explanation of this commandment. Again, remember the commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. Just as God is called gracious, you too must be gracious. Just as God is called compassionate, you too must be compassionate. Just as God is called holy, you too must be holy. In this way did the prophets call God by many appellations. slow to anger, abundant in kindness, just and fair, pure, mighty, powerful, and the like, in order to demonstrate that these are good and proper ways, and that a person is obligated to accustom him or herself to act according to them, to imitate God according to his or her ability. Again, do these teachings apply to how one treats oneself? I think so, right? Yes. Okay. This is extremely helpful. Yes, this is one of my favorite teachings. I think when we have compassion for others, people and other creatures, we gain a sense of balance and inner peace, and also of responsibility to, maybe you mean protect other creatures. I think you mean to protect other creatures. Yes. I agree. I think it's not always the case, but in general, I think people who put compassion out into the world, I think generally tend to receive it in return. Generally, it's not, of course, nothing's for good. Do you feel God embodies these attributes? Slow to anger, abundant in kindness, just and fair, pure, mighty, powerful. Some say yes. Well, one says yes. Good. Thanks, Diane. I think sometimes, when we read accounts in the Torah of God that can be very angry and jealous and wrathful, but more so than not, I think God is compassionate and is always willing to take us back in love. But yes, I wonder about that when we think about Noah and the flood. The act of putting out compassion results in an almost instant sense of feeling better, perhaps compassion coming back, perhaps, but I agree. Helping, I think doing for others is helpful. Sometimes I think it's easier to do for others even than to do for ourselves. I cannot understand a lack of compassion in humans. Yes, that's, but we live in a world, where there are people who are dedicated to treating others cruelly. So it's hard, not the majority, but we do see that. And that is I think above all, that is very hard for us. We who really believe that we're created in the image of God, that we're to love our neighbor as ourselves, who try our best, to live with integrity and to treat others with dignity. It's very painful to see some of the things that go on in our world. It's hard. Okay. This is from Erich Fromm, the famous psychologist, from his book, The Art of Loving. Before we start the discussion of the psychological aspects of selfishness and self-love, the logical fallacy in the notion that love for others and love for oneself are mutually exclusive should be stressed, right? Means they exist at the same time. If it is a virtue to love my neighbor as a human being, it must be a virtue and not a vice to love myself, since I'm a human being too. There is no concept of humanity in which I myself am not included, right? A doctrine which proclaims such an exclusion proves itself to be intrinsically contradictory. The idea expressed in the biblical love thy neighbor as thyself implies that respect for one's own integrity and uniqueness, love for and understanding of one's own self cannot be separated from respect and love and understanding for another individual. The love for my own self is inseparably connected with the love for any other being. I think that's very beautiful. So how does Fromm understand the verse, you shall love your neighbor as yourself? You shall love your neighbor because he is yourself, right? Does he believe love for oneself must precede, love for another? This is where we get to see all my typos. Should precede love for another? I don't know if it has to precede it, but it certainly seems like it has to be concurrent. Right. Yeah, someone's saying that some people are unable to feel, this is from the previous, are unable to feel compassion. And therefore, like rat pups who aren't licked by their mothers are aggressive and angry rats. Okay, yes, they are a single action, loving your neighbor and loving yourself. So love your neighbor as yourself, it really is, it should really be like as you love your neighbor, so you should love yourself, right? Or as you love yourself, so you should love your neighbor. Yes, if loving oneself helps us to love others, it's the model for loving others. Yes, yes. So it is intrinsic to Judaism. This is what I'm trying to show you. Obviously, you can tell that it's not just a good idea, you know. Yes, as you love your neighbor, so you love yourself. Right, right. Good. Okay. Does Jewish tradition support Fromm's reading of the text? A person, okay, I love this actually. So these texts are all from a book called Likutei Moharan. Okay. So look at this. This is from medieval times. Yes, it puts you, okay. A person must find some good point within himself. It is known that a person must take care to be happy always and to keep very far away from depression. But of course, depression as a mental illness is real, and this isn't a cure, just to put it out of your mind. You know, we talked about this before. But it's something that could be used in conjunction with support. But we should be striving to find good points in ourselves. Therefore, by not letting himself fall, but reviving himself by searching and seeking until he finds in himself some good points, gathering and separating those good points from the evil and impurity within him, through this melodies are made, as explained above. Then he is able to pray and sing and give praise to God, and he brings himself vitality and joy through this. For it is certainly right that a person feel ever-increasing joy over every good point stemming from the holiness of Israel that he may yet find in himself. Then when he revives himself and brings himself to joy through this, as explained above, he is then able to pray, sing, and give praise to God. So why does this text tell us that it is critically important that we look to find good points within ourselves? Why? A person must find some good points within himself. Why? Some good points. Well, it does say it revives us, right? It enables us to sing and pray and praise God. It brings us joy. Good. We can only offer what we have. That's true. But we can get help to the person who wrote that prop, because God doesn't make mistakes, meaning that there must be good points. We wouldn't be created in God's image if we didn't have good points in us. Thank you. That's beautiful, Diane. So we can see ourselves in God's image. Yes. Does this text also support the pull yourself up by your own bootstraps? Yeah, this is like that other text, Sylvia, that said, you know, where the rabbis were arguing, does it mean push the depression or the anxiety out or get help? But, you know, I think we're going to read it as, if you can't do it yourself, get help, right, to do it in order to realize what is lovable in us so we may reconnect with love and God. Self-validation, because excessive humility isn't good. If you can't see the good in yourself, you can't recognize it in others. In modern Jewish thought, this reflects Martin Buber's philosophy and perspective. Yes, Jay. Everything good comes from God. If you can't find good in yourself, you're being self-deceptive and negating God. I don't know that I would put it that way, Elizabeth. I would like the way that somebody else put it before, which is God doesn't make mistakes. In other words, there must be good in us if we're created in the image of God, because God wouldn't have created us in God's image in error. So we must, you know, so we don't get depressed. God don't make no junk. I like that. What is encouraged with thoughts that God does make mistakes, so we can accept the fact that it's okay for us to make mistakes. Right. It's helpful to realize. Yes. And we talked about that before. Definitely. But I think in this particular instance, that there must be something inherently good in each creature, each human being created in God's image. Of course, this, you always have something very good, right? We it's just sometimes it's hard to articulate it or uncover it or put your finger on it, but there's a lot of things that do help with that, like gratitude lists, which are so simple but so effective. Every day write 3 things you're grateful for. 3 things, and you'd be surprised, how that has a cumulative effect of kind of rewiring how you think about yourself. What happens to us when we were able, with help if needed, to find and embrace those good points? Right, it uplifts us. And here's the second part of that reading. Okay, and this is another reason why it's important to try to find those good things, because it affects others in the universe. And someone who can make the aforementioned melodies, meaning he's capable of judging himself and therefore all people favorably, even with the rabble and the wicked, because he persistently searches and seeks to find good points in all of them, the which melodies are made as explained above. This tzaddik, so it's a righteous person who looks for the good points in himself and others, since he is on this level, is capable of being the cantor and messenger of the people. That is, he can lead the communal prayers because he has within him this aspect, which is a necessary requirement to be a truly fitting messenger of the people. For he must possess the aspect whereby all the good points are drawn to him and are merged within him, so that he is capable of gathering all the good points that are to be found in each Jew, even a Jewish sinner, as explained above. So what's another byproduct of finding goodness within ourselves as well as happiness? That we can see it in others, right? Oh, you're welcome, Karen. Okay, you can see it in others, right? You can see it in others as well. And if you can find the good in others, right, the outcome is a better world, really. Do you find this to be true, that those who see the good in themselves judge others favorably as well, and in so doing attract good to themselves and bring goodness to all around them? I think that definitely from Elizabeth was from before. So yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, sort of this whole attitude, the attitude adjustment is really helpful too. Okay. So now I want to shift to some texts about, because, we just had yesterday, now mandatory order to wear face masks indoors. Right now it's mandatory as of yesterday, although it will not be enforced criminally, only by the health department. But, and there are some people that are shrine Gewalt. So I wanted to show you what our tradition has to say about these kinds of things. Yes, it helps us to be more forgiving of ourselves and others. Exactly. Okay. Stay at home and wear mask orders. Judaism's commitment to physical care. Okay, physical self-care. The sages taught, these are all Talmudic texts. They come right out of the Talmud. So they're old, 2,500 to 2,800 or 2,500 to 3,000 years ago. The sages taught, if there is a plague in the city, as there is now, right, gather your feet, meaning limit the time you spend out of the house, as it is stated in the verse, and none of you shall go out of the opening of his house until morning. And it says in another verse, come, my people, enter into your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself for a little moment until the anger has passed by. And it says, outside the sword will bereave, and in the chambers terror. So what is the first thing the rabbis teach us that we should do in the face of a plague? 3,000 years ago, what are they telling us to do? Stay home. Exactly. Stay inside. Stay in our home, right? As the little ditties are, stay the bleep at home, right? That's what the rabbis are telling us. And so I see smiles of the people who've seen those little videos, okay? What does it mean that outside the sword will bereave and in the chambers terror? Well, I think we know what outside the sword will bereave means, right? What happens if you're out too much in the public during a plague, right? You're likely to get it and die from it. But inside the chamber's terror, outside there'll be death, but inside we're scared. Exactly. There's still fear, and there's still fear and terror indoors, but we won't be dead, Well, okay. So let's keep going, because these are just, this whole series to me is so great. Like that this could be from between, let's see, it's around, the Babylonian Talmud was codified in like 600. So it's 1400 years ago, right? And if you would say that this matter applies only where there is no fear inside, which explains why it is preferable to remain indoors, but where there is fear inside, one might think that when he goes out and sit amongst people in general company, it's better. Therefore, the Gemara introduces the third verse and says, come in here, outside the sword will bereave, and inside the chambers terror. This means that although there is terror in the chambers, outside the sword will bereave, so it's safer to remain indoors. And then here's another one from Bava Kama. At a time when there was a plague, Rava would close the windows of his house, as it is written, for death has come up into our windows. So does it surprise you that, I'm going to change this, 1400 years ago, that the rabbis of 1400 years ago understood the concepts of social distancing and the sense of staying at home? Right. Leviticus also, right. Malaria, bad air, good. Or the Leviticus tells them to wear masks over their, in the case of leprosy, to wear masks over their noses and mouths. No, it's not surprising. Good. All right. It sort of surprises me that it's so specific, but they were not unaccustomed to plagues. So, how about that they understood that as frightening as it was to stay at home, it was deadly to go out? They've been smart for a long time. Terry, you're so cute. Okay. All right. Here's another one. I love this one too. Okay. Like this one to me is akin to death was all around. This one to me is akin to, don't touch your face, which I am terrible about, don't touch your face. I actually haven't been out of my house or touched anything other than my computer, but now it just reminded me to do the hand sanitizer. Okay, I love this, but one must refrain from putting coins in one's mouth, lest it's covered with dried saliva of those affected with boils, right? This is why we don't want kids to put things in their mouths. You don't know what's been on that thing, right? Am I right? Okay, it said he should not even put it in the palm of his hand or in his armpit, lest it touched a metzora, right? A leper or a harmful poison. He should not put a loaf of bread under his armpit because of the sweat. He should not put a cooked item or drinks under the bed, since an evil spirit rests on them. Face mirror. He should not put, okay, I did that already. He should not stick a knife in an etrog or a radish, lest one fall on its edge and die. So to me, this is a combination of common sense and a little bit of Bubba Misa, right? Don't put it under the bed because that's where the evil spirit. I would say don't put it under the bed because you'll forget about it. And then, by the time you find it, an evil spirit will surely have rested upon it. But anyway, Haga, similarly, he should be careful of all things that cause danger, because danger is stricter than transgressions, and one should be more careful with an uncertain danger than with an uncertain prohibition. Like, if you don't know if this could harm you, yeah, we do need to follow these rules, but I mean, I don't think most of us put a loaf of bread under our armpit, but we might, except now it's wrapped in plastic, I mean, if you're trying to carry a lot of things, you might. They also prohibited to go into a dangerous place. I love this, such as under a leaning wall, right? You don't want it to fall on your head, or going out alone at night. Those are dangerous. They also prohibited to drink water from rivers at night or to put one's mouth on a stream of water and drink, because these matters have a concern of danger. I'm not sure what the danger is exactly, if it's, you know, pollutants or disease, or if it's falling in and drowning, I don't know. It is the widespread custom not to drink water during the equinox, and the early ones wrote this, and it is not to be changed. Typhus, thank you, Sylvia. She's also a doctor, so, right. Don't put it under the bed, as vermin will have visited it and spread whatever they have. Thank you, thus the evil spirit. And I have seen baguettes being carried under one's armpits, right, when their hands are filled with other groceries, typhus in the water, very good, helpful. They also wrote to flee from the city when a plague is in the city, and one should leave at the beginning of the plague and not at the end. And all of these things are because of the danger, and a person who guards his soul will distance himself from them, and it is prohibited to rely on a miracle in all of these matters. This last phrase here is, to me, it goes with the Jewish idea that God helps those who help themselves, you know, like Moses at the shores of the sea praying, and God says, why are you crying out to me? Get going, you know, that these are things that we need to do to take care of ourselves. So what does this text teach us about the rabbinic view of keeping oneself safe? Do it, right? How would you characterize these prohibitions? Do they all make sense? Do only some of them? I mean, I think most of them make sense, you know. Sylvia helped explain, right? Joyce writes, this is hilarious. If anyone survived grandmothers and moms wiping someone's face with a napkin that they spit on, they'll never get COVID. It's so true, isn't it? Like, how many times do I and then wipe, you know? Oh my goodness, that's so true. What she shouldn't do right now. What does it mean? A person who guards his soul will distance himself from them, and it is prohibited to rely on a miracle in these matters. Yes, of course, we all do that. So, right, we talked about soul love before. Right, why don't people who go into church, these maskless to church, this whole thing with the going maskless to church, I mean, I think that this is just showing you that this is, you know, that our tradition is showing us that it is not okay to venture outdoors into a plague-ridden area without protecting yourself. It just isn't. You can see it's right out of the Talmud. I didn't have to make it up. You know, that it's just so clear, you know. In fact, I saw somebody posted something today on the, right, it shows disrespect for others as well. Someone posted something today, I think it's on the Ohef Sholom Temple Facebook friends Facebook page, of an outdoor minyan where they had put up cones 6 feet apart, front and back and side to side, and there were all these Orthodox men with the huge taluses praying, and everyone was 6 feet apart. And, you know, and there were more than 10, but maybe not many more than 10, you know, maybe 12. I mean, but it was, you know, there is a way. If you're willing, there's a way. I find comfort in the sage's advice. Yes, and the wisdom of our ancestors. Exactly. Yeah, they make sense. Okay. Just want to move on to a few more. These ones right here are from Brainy Brown. She says, well, let me just see if there's one more. No, we ended with her. Okay, so we can do this. I didn't, if there was another one, I wanted to do that first. Spirituality emerged as a fundamental guidepost in wholeheartedness, not religiosity, but the deeply held belief that we are inextricably connected to one another by a force greater than ourselves, a force grounded in love and compassion. For some of us, that's God. For others, it's nature, art, or even human soulfulness. I believe that owning our worthiness is the act of acknowledging that we are sacred, right? This goes back to being created in the image of God and loving our neighbors as ourselves, or our fellows as ourselves. Perhaps embracing vulnerability and overcoming numbing is ultimately about the care and feeding of our spirits. And then she writes, I believe that owning our worthiness is the act of acknowledging that we are sacred. Perhaps embracing vulnerability and overcoming numbing is ultimately about the care and feeding of our spirits. So I think in her own language, she's saying basically the same thing that we've been talking about all along, which is self-care, both emotionally, well, not both, emotionally, self-care, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, or mentally, physically, and spiritually, are all Jewish values. And they come out of Torah, and they go through the rabbinic period, right, the Talmud, and they continue on in the writings that come afterwards, in the Middle Ages, even through the Renaissance period. This is a theme that runs all the way through our tradition from the beginning. From in the beginning, God created humanity in God's image, in the image of God, God created him, male and female, God created them. From almost the very beginning of Genesis unto today, this is part of our tradition. We need to take care of ourselves. So if we have trouble doing that, we need to get help to figure out how to do that better, because we are worthy of that. We are worthy of that. Ruth asks about loving, not putting us at some degree of risk. Section 4 is relevant to our query. Okay, Ruth, check out this section that we just talked about. I'm not 100% sure. Oh my God, I can't even look. Okay, we're not gonna look. All right, so I didn't see any questions about last week's class. We raced through that. But what I do want to talk about for this minute, for this last 4 minutes that we have, is we have one more class. So I had a couple of ideas of what it might look like. One thing I thought we might talk about, one topic is what will the world look like? I don't want to say post-pandemic. I don't want to say post the virus, because I think the virus is going to be with us forever, like influenza. You know what I mean? Unless it's like polio and we somehow develop some kind of a vaccine that we can eradicate it completely. But what will the world look like in all different aspects of life? Another thing I thought we could look at is how has this virus redefined the nature of community, of synagogue community, synagogue life, just of community in general, and for better or for worse, and how will that look going forward as well. And then a third topic we could talk about is that dovetailing of anti-Semitism as a virus. Although it sounds like some of you just watched that thing, so it's not as interesting, although what I would give is with texts, you know what I mean, from our tradition. So anybody want to vote, or anybody have a comment, in the chat, what you think, what sounds interesting to you? I mean, obviously, as you could see, we could have multiple classes, But I think I'm sort of interested in looking at, the nature of how the virus has transformed our lives, and even the nature of community and what that means and looks like. But you tell me if you feel differently. How many people vote for that? Right. You could write yes or raise your hands. Okay, I'm seeing some hands raised. Let's see. Oh, let's see. Yes, anti-Semitism is real and current. You have to have the ability to respond to it. I think it might be interesting to see our world would look like post-pandemic. I love the idea of post-virus and how we've changed nature of community. You trust my decision, how it's transformed us with so much death around us. I'd like to continue the afterlife death topic. Yeah, I mean, I could go back and flesh out a lot of that. That was definitely among the more popular of the transformation of community, how we celebrate or ritualize the understanding of it, recovery, we like my choice. Okay, well, I'll figure it out. How does that sound? Just because this is the last in this series doesn't mean that we can't have another class someday about death and, afterlife. I hope you continue for quite a while. Thank you so much, Diane. Aren't you sweet? Well, I am going to, depart a moment early, because I have a feeling my fourth funeral just came in, because the phone's been blowing up for the last hour and 15 minutes. So, and I do have one in an hour and a half. So, hence the black uniform. But anyway, love to all. I need to go. Thank you for being, oh, we love you so much. We feel reconnected. Oh, that's so sweet. I love you guys as well. You like my choice too. Okay, I shall figure it out.